The garage door creaked shut behind Elena, sealing her in with a thud that echoed like a gavel. She stood frozen, her suitcase still clutched in one hand, the crumpled note in the other, her daughter's jagged handwriting burning into her palm. "Mom, don't come inside until you read this." It began, and already her heart was a drumbeat, threatening to drown out reason. Elena Martinez had been gone for 3 weeks, a work trip to Seattle that stretched longer than planned. She was 38, a freelance photographer whose lens captured the raw beauty of the world, but lately, her own life felt like an out-of-focus frame. She was tired, bone-deep tired, not just from the red-eye flight but from the weight of a marriage that had crumbled years ago and a teenage daughter, Sophie, who seemed to drift further away each day. The note trembled in her hand as she leaned against the workbench, the cold metal of a wrench biting into her thigh. The garage smelled of oil and dust, a familiar refuge in their modest Portland home, but tonight it felt like a cage. She unfolded the note further, her eyes scanning the words. "I saw you with her, Mom." "I know." Her breath caught, sharp and jagged, as if the air itself had turned to glass. Sophie, her 16-year-old daughter, had seen. What? Elena's mind raced back to Mira, the woman who had slipped into her life like a melody she couldn't stop humming. Mira, with her quiet intensity, her dark eyes that held entire galaxies, and the way her touch had awakened something Elena thought she'd buried long ago. They'd been careful, discreet, even, but Sophie's words were a guillotine, slicing through the fragile secrecy they'd built. Elena's knees buckled and she sank onto a stool, the note now a lifeline and a curse. She pictured Sophie's face, all sharp angles and defiance, the girl who'd once clung to her at night but now locked her out with a single sheet of paper. The garage felt smaller, the walls pressing in as the truth loomed. Her daughter had orchestrated this moment, trapping her here to confront something Elena wasn't ready to face. She'd met Mira 6 months ago at a local art gallery, where Myra's paintings hung like whispered secrets. Mira Nguyen, 35, was a painter whose work bled with color and emotion, each stroke a confession of a life lived on the edges of acceptance. She was slight, with long black hair that fell in waves, and a smile that could unravel Elena's carefully guarded heart. They'd started as friends' coffee dates, late-night talks about art and dreams, but friendship had bloomed into something deeper, something Elena hadn't dared name until Myra's lips brushed hers one rainy evening in a park. It was a kiss that tasted of freedom and fear, and it had changed everything. Now, standing in the garage, Elena's mind replayed that kiss, the warmth of Myra's hand against her cheek, the way it felt like coming home. But Sophie's note was a cold splash of reality. "You need to figure this out before you come back to us," it continued. Sophie and the ghost of their old family, the one Elena had tried to hold together even after her divorce from David. She'd told herself she was protecting Sophie by keeping Mira a secret, but secrets, she realized now, were just lies dressed up in silence. The garage light flickered, casting shadows that danced like accusations. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. She couldn't face Mira yet, not when her daughter's words were still sinking in. She reread the note, searching for clues to Sophie's anger. "I saw you at the cafe with her. You looked happy. Happier than you ever did with Dad." The words stung, not because they were false but because they were true. Elena had spent years in a marriage that felt like a slow suffocation, and Mira had been the first breath of air in a decade. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to steady the storm in her mind. Sophie wasn't just angry, she was hurt. Elena could see it in the shaky loops of her handwriting, in the way she'd chosen to lock her mother out rather than confront her face to face. The garage door was locked from the outside. A deadbolt Sophie must have rigged before leaving the note. Elena could break it down, force her way into the house, but what then? Demand answers from a daughter who'd already judged her? Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Mira. "I'm home. Sophie knows. I'm stuck in the garage." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. She hit send, her heart pounding as she waited for a reply. The garage was silent except for the faint hum of the streetlights outside, and Elena felt the weight of her choices pressing down. She'd spent her life trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, but in chasing perfection, she'd lost herself. Myra's reply came quickly. "I'm coming over. Stay there." Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to see Mira, to feel the comfort of her presence, but she also dreaded it. What if Sophie was watching? What if this was the moment everything unraveled? She glanced at the note again, her eyes catching on the final line. You can't keep pretending, Mom. Not anymore. Elena let out a shaky breath, her fingers tracing the edge of the workbench. She thought of the photographs she'd taken over the years, moments frozen in time, each one a story of joy or pain or something in between. She'd always believed she could capture truth through her lens, but now she wondered if she'd been blind to the truth in her own home. Sophie had seen her with Mira, had seen the way Elena's face lit up, and instead of understanding, she'd built a wall literally and figuratively. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped Elena out of her thoughts. Her pulse quickened. Was it Mira? Or Sophie coming back to face her? She stood, clutching the note like a shield, and moved toward the small window in the garage door. The headlights cut through the dusk, blinding her for a moment, and then she saw Myra's silhouette stepping out of the car. Her heart leapt and sank at the same time. Mira. Her anchor, her complication. Mira knocked softly on the garage door, her voice low and steady. Elena? You okay in there? Elena pressed her hand against the door, wishing she could touch Mira through the wood and metal. I'm here, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if Mira could hear. The note crinkled in her other hand, a reminder of the choice she faced. Stay locked in the garage, hiding from her truth, or find a way to open the door and face it. Myra's voice was a lifeline, pulling Elena back from the edge of her spiraling thoughts. I'm going to try the lock, Mira said, her tone calm but laced with urgency. Elena stepped back, her heart thudding as she heard the faint jangle of keys and the scrape of metal. The deadbolt didn't budge. Sophie had planned this too well, turning the garage into a fortress of her own making. Elena's eyes darted around the dimly lit space, landing on the cluttered workbench, the old bike in the corner, the shelves lined with paint cans and forgotten tools. It was a place of utility, not confession, yet here she was, trapped with her secrets. She moved to the door, pressing her palm against it again. Mira, I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice cracking. Sophie. She saw us. She's hurt. There was a pause, then Myra's voice, softer now, like a hand reaching through the darkness. We'll figure this out together, okay? Just talk to me. Elena closed her eyes, picturing Myra's face, those dark, searching eyes, the way her lips curved when she was trying to be brave. She wanted to believe Myra's words, but the note in her hand felt like a verdict. I didn't mean for her to find out like this, Elena said, sinking back onto the stool. I thought I could keep it separatious from her. From everything. She laughed bitterly, the sound swallowed by the garage's cold walls. I was so stupid. You're not stupid, Mira said firmly. You're human. You were trying to protect her. Elena heard the faint thud of Mira sitting down on the other side of the door, as if she could bridge the gap between them through sheer will. Tell me about the note. What does it say? Elena read it aloud, her voice trembling as she recited Sophie's words. Each sentence felt like a stone dropped into a still pond, rippling through her. When she reached the part about being happier with Mira than with David, her throat tightened. She's right, she whispered. I was happier. And I hate that she saw it before I could explain. Mira was quiet for a moment, and Elena imagined her processing, her artist's mind turning the words into colors and shapes. She's 16, Mira said finally. She's trying to make sense of you, of herself. Maybe locking you in here is her way of asking you to be honest. Elena's fingers tightened around the note. Honest. The word was a blade cutting through years of half-truths. She told herself she was shielding Sophie by keeping her relationship with Mira quiet, but maybe she'd just been shielding herself. Coming out at 38, in a world that still sharpened its judgments, was terrifying. She'd grown up in a small town where love like hers was whispered about, not celebrated. Even now, in progressive Portland, she felt the weight of eyes on her neighbors, co-workers, her own daughter. Do you think she hates me? Elena asked, her voice barely audible. No, Mira said immediately. She's angry, maybe scared, but she doesn't hate you. She locked you in the garage, not out of her life. She wants you to face this. Elena heard a soft laugh, tinged with sadness. She's got your fire, you know. That stubborn streak. Elena smiled despite herself, picturing Sophie's fierce glare, so like her own. She stood and paced the small space, her boots scuffing against the concrete floor. I don't even know where she is right now. She could be anywhere. Panic crept into her voice. What if she's run off? What if, Elena? Mira interrupted, her voice steady. She's probably at home, waiting for you to figure this out. She left the note for a reason. She's giving you a chance to respond. Elena stopped pacing, her eyes falling on a photo tucked into a corner of the workbench, a picture she'd taken of Sophie at age 10, grinning on a swing set. The memory stung, a reminder of simpler days when love was just hugs and bedtime stories. She wanted to be that mother again, the one who could fix everything with a kiss and a promise. But Sophie wasn't a child anymore, and this wasn't a scraped knee. I need to talk to her, Elena said, more to herself than to Mira. But I can't do it from in here. She tested the door again, rattling the handle, but it held firm. Frustration surged, hot and sharp. Damn it, Sophie. Let me try something, Mira said. Elena heard her stand, then the sound of footsteps fading. A moment later she was back. I checked the side door to the house. It's unlocked. I can go in, find Sophie, maybe get the key. Elena's stomach twisted. No, don't. If she sees you, it might make things worse. The thought of Mira confronting Sophie, of her daughter's anger spilling over onto the woman Elena loved, was unbearable. Just stay with me, please. Okay, Mira said softly. I'm not going anywhere. Elena heard her settle back against the door, and the quiet stretched between them, heavy but comforting. She slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the door, mirroring Myra's position. They were so close, yet separated by wood and steel and by the weight of Elena's unspoken fears. I never told you this, Elena began, her voice low, but when I was Sophie's age I had a crush on my art teacher, Miss Larson. She had this laugh like wind chimes, and I'd stay after class just to hear it. She paused, the memory flooding back. I never told anyone. I didn't even know what it meant, not really. But I knew it was something I had to hide. Myra's voice was gentle. What changed? Life, Elena said simply. I got married, had Sophie, built a life I thought I was supposed to want. But then I met you and it was like waking up. She pressed her hand against the door, imagining Myra's on the other side. I don't want to hide anymore, but I don't know how to do this without losing her. You won't lose her, Mira said, her voice fierce with conviction. You're her mother. She's trying to understand you, not push you away. But you have to meet her halfway. Elena nodded, though Mira couldn't see. She looked at the note again, its words blurring through tears she hadn't realized were falling. She thought of Sophie alone in the house, maybe staring at her own reflection, wondering who her mother really was. The garage, once a prison, began to feel like a crucible, a place where Elena had to burn away her fears to find the truth. I'm going to write her back, Elena said suddenly, the idea sparking like a match. She scrambled to the workbench, grabbing a pen and an old receipt. If she can leave me a note, I can leave her one too. Her hand shook as she began to write, the words pouring out. Sophie, I'm sorry. I should have told you about Mira, about me. I love you more than anything, and I'm trying to be the mother you deserve. Please, let's talk. She slid the note under the door, hoping Mira would find a way to get it to Sophie. As she waited, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. The garage was still a cage, but for the first time, Elena felt like she might find a way to open the door. Myra's fingers brushed the edge of the receipt as it slid under the door, her touch gentle, as if she could sense the weight of Elena's words. I've got it, she said, her voice muffled but warm. I'll get this to Sophie. Hang in there, okay? Elena pressed her forehead against the door, nodding silently, her breath uneven. The garage was quiet now, save for the faint hum of the world outside, and she felt suspended, caught between the past she'd hidden and the future she couldn't yet see. She stood and paced again, her boots echoing in the small space. The air felt thicker, charged with the anticipation of what might come next. She imagined Sophie reading her note, her daughter's sharp green eyes narrowing, weighing each word. Would it be enough? Could a few scribbled lines on a receipt undo the hurt Elena had caused? She stopped at the workbench, her fingers tracing the edge of the photo of Sophie on the swing set. The girl in that picture was gone, replaced by someone fiercer, someone who demanded truth. Elena's mind drifted to the first time she'd realized she loved Mira. It was a quiet moment, not a grand gesture. A rainy afternoon in Myra's studio, watching her paint. Mira had been working on a canvas, her hands streaked with blue and gold, and she'd looked up at Elena with a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You see me," Mira had said, and those 3 words had cracked something open in Elena's chest. For years she'd felt invisible, even to herself. But Myra's gaze was a mirror, reflecting back the woman Elena had always been but never dared to show. Now, trapped in the garage, that memory felt both like a lifeline and a wound. She loved Mira, loved her with a fierceness that scared her, but she loved Sophie too, with a depth that was bone and blood. The 2 loves felt like opposing currents, pulling her apart. She sank back onto the stool, her hands clasped tightly, as if she could hold herself together through sheer force of will. Outside, she heard footsteps again, Mira's light and quick, then another set, heavier, hesitant. Her heart leapt. "Sophie." She stood, moving to the window, but the angle was wrong, and all she could see was the glow of the porch light. "Mira," she called, her voice tight. "It's me," Mira replied, and then softer, "Sophie's here." Elena's breath caught. She pressed her hands against the door, straining to hear. There was a murmur of voices, too low to make out, and then Sophie's voice, sharp and raw. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" Elena's throat closed. She wanted to shout, to beg, to explain, but the door was still between them. "Sophie, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted to protect you. I didn't know how to say it." "Protect me?" Sophie's voice was a blade cutting through the wood. "You lied. I saw you with her, laughing like you were someone else. Someone I didn't know." The hurt in her words was a punch to Elena's chest. She leaned against the door, her palms flat, as if she could reach through it to her daughter. "I'm still me," Elena said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm still your mom. I love her, Sophie. I didn't know how to tell you because I was scared you'd look at me like I was a stranger." There was silence, long and heavy, and Elena's heart pounded in the quiet. She imagined Sophie standing there, her arms crossed, her jaw set, the way she always looked when she was trying not to cry. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice softer but still edged with pain. "You should have trusted me." "I know," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. "I should have. I'm trying now." She glanced at the workbench, at the photo, and something in her shifted. She'd spent so long hiding, but maybe the real courage was in letting herself be seen. "Can you open the door, Sophie? Please." Another pause, then the sound of metal scraping the key in the lock. Elena's breath hitched as the door creaked open, and there was Sophie, her face pale under the porch light, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Mira stood behind her, her expression a mix of relief and worry, her hand hovering as if she wanted to reach out but wasn't sure she should. Elena stepped forward, her suitcase forgotten on the floor. "Sophie," she began, but her daughter held up a hand, stopping her. "I read your note," Sophie said, her voice unsteady. "But I need to know. Are you going to keep her a secret? Or is this who you are now?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Elena looked at Mira, then back at Sophie. Her heart was a battlefield, but for the first time, she knew what she had to do. "This is who I am," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I love Mira. But I love you too, Sophie. And I'm not going to hide anymore, not from you, not from anyone." Sophie's eyes searched hers, and for a moment, Elena saw the little girl from the swing set, the one who trusted her completely. Then Sophie nodded, a small, jerky motion, and stepped aside, letting Elena out of the garage. The night air was cool against her skin, and she felt like she was stepping into a new world, one where she could finally breathe. Mira moved closer, her hand brushing Elena's, a silent promise. Sophie watched them, her expression unreadable, but she didn't pull away. "I need time," Sophie said finally, her voice low. "But I don't want to lose you, Mom." "You won't," Elena said, her voice fierce. She reached for Sophie, hesitating, then pulled her into a hug. Sophie stiffened at first, then relaxed, her arms wrapping around Elena. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. They stood there, the 3 of them in the driveway, the stars overhead bright against the darkening sky. Elena felt the weight of the note still in her pocket, a reminder of the truth she'd finally spoken. The road ahead would be hard conversations, tears, maybe more locked doors, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to walk it. The driveway felt like a liminal space, a threshold between the life Elena had known and the one she was stepping into. She held Sophie close, her daughter's warmth grounding her, even as the uncertainty of what came next loomed large. Mira stood a step away, her presence a quiet strength, her dark eyes watching them with a mix of hope and caution. Sophie pulled back first, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. "I'm going inside," she said, her voice rough but not unkind. "I just need to think." Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She watched as Sophie turned and walked toward the house, her silhouette framed by the porch light. The door clicked shut behind her, and the sound felt final, like the closing of a chapter. Elena turned to Mira, who was still standing there, her hands tucked into her pockets. "You okay?" Mira asked, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know," Elena admitted. She ran a hand through her hair, the weight of the night settling into her bones. "I didn't expect this. Any of it." She gestured vaguely at the garage, the note still burning a hole in her pocket. "I thought I could control how this played out, but Sophie, she's always been one step ahead of me." Mira smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "She's your daughter." "Of course she is." She stepped closer, her hand brushing Elena's arm. The touch was electric, grounding, and Elena felt the urge to collapse into it, to let Mira hold her until the world made sense again. But she didn't. "Not yet." "Let's sit," Mira said, nodding toward the curb. They sank down onto the cold concrete, the street quiet except for the distant hum of a neighbor's TV. The stars were brighter now, pinpricks of light in the vast dark, and Elena felt small beneath them. She leaned her shoulder against Mira's, drawing strength from the contact. "I meant what I said to her," Elena said after a moment, "about not hiding anymore. But it's terrifying, Mira. I've spent so long being someone else. For Sophie, for David, for everyone." She laughed, a brittle sound. "I don't even know how to be me." Mira turned to her, her eyes searching. "You're already you, Elena. The way you see the world through your camera, the way you love Sophie, the way you make me feel like I'm enough, that's you. The real you." She reached for Elena's hand, lacing their fingers together. "You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep showing up." Elena squeezed her hand, her chest aching with gratitude and fear. What if Sophie can't accept this? Accept us? The question hung heavy, a fear she hadn't dared voice until now. "She will," Mira said, her voice firm. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but she will. She loves you. And love doesn't just disappear, it bends, it grows." She paused, her thumb brushing over Elena's knuckles. "My parents didn't understand me at first either. They thought my art was a phase, me was a phase. But they came around because they saw I wasn't going to stop being myself." Elena nodded, thinking of her own parents, long gone but always a shadow in her mind. They'd been kind but traditional, and she'd never told them about Miss Larson or the feelings she'd buried. She wondered what they'd think of her now, sitting on a curb with a woman who made her heart sing. She hoped they'd be proud, even if they didn't understand. "I want to be brave for her," Elena said, her voice low. "For Sophie. I want her to see that love isn't something to be ashamed of, no matter who it's for." She looked at Mira, her heart swelling. "And I want to be brave for you." Mira's eyes softened and she leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to Elena's forehead. "You already are," she whispered. The moment felt sacred, a quiet promise under the stars, and Elena let herself sink into it, just for a second. They sat there for a while, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Elena thought about the future, telling Sophie more, introducing Mira properly, facing the world as her true self. It wouldn't be easy. Portland was liberal, but judgment still lingered in sidelong glances, in whispered comments. And Sophie, she'd need time, patience, love. But for the first time Elena felt ready to face it, not alone but with Mira by her side. Eventually they stood, brushing gravel from their jeans. "I should go talk to her," Elena said, glancing at the house. The windows were dark, but she knew Sophie was in there, probably curled up in her room, wrestling with her own storm of emotions. "Do you want me to come with you?" Mira asked, her voice hesitant. Elena shook her head. "Not yet. This part." I need to do alone. She squeezed Myra's hand one last time, then let go, the absence of her touch like a small ache. But don't go far, okay? Never, Myra said, her smile a beacon in the dark. Elena watched as she walked back to her car, her silhouette fading into the night. Then she turned toward the house, her heart pounding but resolute. Inside, the house was quiet, the air thick with the scent of lavender from a candle Sophie must have lit. Elena climbed the stairs, her footsteps soft on the worn carpet. Sophie's door was closed, but a sliver of light spilled out from underneath. She knocked gently, her heart in her throat. "Sophie," she called, her voice steady despite the nerves. "Can we talk?" There was a long pause, then the sound of movement, a chair creaking, footsteps. The door opened and Sophie stood there, her eyes wary but not cold. "Okay," she said simply, stepping back to let Elena in. The room was a mess of posters and clothes, a teenage sanctuary that felt both familiar and foreign. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, Sophie perching on her desk chair, arms crossed. The silence was heavy, but Elena didn't rush to fill it. She'd spent too long rushing, hiding, avoiding. Now she would wait. "I'm sorry," Elena began, her voice soft but clear. "I should have told you about Mira. About me. I was scared, but that's no excuse. You deserved the truth." Sophie looked down, her fingers twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. I didn't know you were like that," she said, her voice small. "And it felt like you were choosing her over me." "Never," Elena said fiercely, leaning forward. "You're my daughter, Sophie. You're my whole world. Mira. She's part of me, but she doesn't take anything away from you. I promise." Sophie's eyes met hers, searching, and Elena saw the flicker of hope there. Fragile but real. It was enough for now, it was enough. Sophie's room felt like a bridge, fragile but holding, as Elena sat across from her daughter. The air was heavy with unspoken questions, but for the first time, Elena wasn't afraid of them. She'd spent years building walls around her heart, her truth, but tonight, in this messy teenage bedroom, those walls were crumbling, and she was ready to let them fall. "I want to know about her," Sophie said suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence. "Mira. Who is she to you?" Her tone wasn't accusatory. Not anymore, just curious, tinged with the vulnerability of a girl trying to understand her mother. Elena took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Myra's. She's someone who sees me," she said, echoing the words that had defined their love. "She's an artist like me, but with paint instead of a camera. She's kind and strong, and she makes me feel like I can be myself, not just the mom or the ex-wife or the person everyone expects me to be." She paused, searching Sophie's face. "I love her, Sophie. And I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth." Sophie nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Did you love Dad like that?" The question was a whisper, but it hit like a shout. Elena's chest tightened. She thought of David, the man she'd married at 22, the man who'd been her best friend until their love faded into routine. "I loved him," she said honestly. "But it was different. It was what I thought I was supposed to want. With Mira, it's like I found a part of myself I didn't know was missing." Sophie was quiet, her fingers still twisting that thread. Then she looked up, her eyes glistening. "I don't want you to change, Mom. I just want you to be happy. But it's weird, you know? Thinking of you with someone who's not Dad." "I know," Elena said, her voice soft. She reached out, hesitating, then placed a hand on Sophie's knee. "It's weird for me too. But I'm still your mom. That's never going to change." Sophie nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I saw you with her at the cafe," she said, her voice barely audible. "You were laughing and you looked free. I've never seen you like that. And it scared me because I thought maybe you didn't need me anymore." "Oh, Sophie," Elena said, her heart breaking. She moved to the floor, kneeling in front of her daughter. "I will always need you. You're my kid, my reason for everything. Mira doesn't change that, she just makes me better at being your mom. Because she makes me better at being me." Sophie let out a shaky breath, then leaned forward, resting her forehead against Elena's. It was a gesture from childhood, one they hadn't shared in years, and it brought tears to Elena's eyes. They stayed like that for a moment, the world narrowing to just the two of them, mother and daughter, finding their way back to each other. The next morning, Elena woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Sophie's music drifting from the kitchen. She found her daughter at the table, eating cereal, her phone propped up with the video playing. It was such a normal scene, yet it felt like a miracle after the night before. "Morning," Elena said, her voice cautious. "Morning," Sophie replied, glancing up. There was a shy smile there, small but real. I texted Mira. Invited her over for dinner tonight. Is that okay?" Elena froze, her coffee mug halfway to her lips. "You. What?" Sophie shrugged, her cheeks pink. "I figured if she's important to you, I should meet her. Like officially." She looked down, poking at her cereal. "I'm not saying it's all fine yet, but I want to try." Elena's heart swelled, a mix of pride and gratitude so fierce it nearly knocked her over. "Yeah," she said, her voice thick. "That's more than okay." That evening Mira arrived with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile. Elena watched as Sophie shook her hand, awkward but polite, and the three of them sat down to a dinner of takeout pizza, Sophie's choice. The conversation was tentative at first, stilted with the weight of newness, but then Sophie asked Mira about her paintings, and Myra's face lit up, her hands moving as she described her latest work. Elena watched them, her heart full, seeing the first threads of connection forming. Later, as Mira helped clear the table, she leaned close to Elena and whispered, "She's amazing. Just like her mom." Elena smiled, her hand finding Myra's under the table, a quiet promise of the life they were building. The garage, once a prison, became a memoria turning point. Elena framed Sophie's note and hung it in her studio, not as a reminder of pain but of courage. She and Sophie still had hard days, moments of doubt and misunderstanding, but they talked now, openly, honestly. And Mira was there, not as a secret but as a part of their family, her laughter filling the house alongside Sophie's music. Elena's camera captured it all, the way Sophie's eyes softened when Mira told a story, the way Myra's hand fit perfectly in hers, the way their home felt alive again. She'd spent years chasing the perfect shot, but now she realized the truest moments weren't captured through a lens. They were lived, messy and beautiful, in the open light of love. The note had locked her in the garage, but it had also unlocked her heart. And as Elena stood in her backyard one evening, watching Sophie and Mira toss a frisbee under the setting sun, she knew she'd found her truth, not just in loving Mira, but in loving herself enough to let Sophie see it. That was the real victory, the one that made every locked door worth opening. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.